Lesson 104, completing the square. Completing the square is just a process used to form a perfect square trinomial. So here's an example of a perfect square binomial. And then trinomial, then when we multiply this out, we get x squared minus 2 times 7 times x, which is 14x, plus 7 squared, which is 49. So that's a perfect square trinomial, an example of one. So let's say we want to complete the square for this sum. What we're saying is we want a perfect square binomial. So we want, what are we going to add here to make it a perfect square binomial? All you do is you take this number 6, you divide it by 2, and then square it. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, square it, and you get 9. So 9 is the number that was missing there. Here's an example where we need to complete the square. So we take negative 12, divide it by 2, which is negative 6, square it, which is a positive 36, and we just completed the square. Now, example 2, we want to have an equation, and we're going to solve for x. So we have x squared plus 12x, and leave a space here for completing the square, equals 13. So we want to add half of 12 squared, which is plus 36. Because there's an equal sign, we can't just add numbers willy-nilly. We have to add it the same on both sides. So we have x squared plus 12x plus 36 equals 49. And then what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite the left side as the square of a binomial. Since it's a perfect square, we have x plus 6, quantity squared, equals 49. What you want to do now is take the square root of both sides. And when you take the square root, remember we learned this just a couple lessons ago, you want plus and minus square root of 49. So we have x plus 6. When you take the square root of a perfect square, you just get x plus 6. And then we're going to write two equations to solve. So write the two equations and solve. So we have x plus 6 equals 7, or x plus 6 equals negative 7. So we're going to subtract 6 and get x equals 1, or, and we subtract 6 over here, x is going to be a negative 13. So x could be a 1 or a negative 13. So here's another example. X squared minus 16x equals 36. So we're going to take half of 16, which is negative 8, and square it. So we get plus 64. We have to add that to both sides. So when we factor this side, we get x minus 8 quantity squared equals 100. We'll take the square root of both sides, and we get x minus 8 equals plus or minus 10. We'll write our two equations. X minus 8 equals 10, or x minus 8 equals negative 10. So we add 8, and we get x equals 18, or we add 8 here, x equals negative 2. So that's our solution, 18 or negative 2. Here's another example. If we have 3x squared plus 12x, leave a space, equals 42. Now, it's best to get the coefficient of x squared to be 1, so we're just going to divide everything by 3 to get x squared plus 4x equals, and 42 divided by 3 is 14. Then we're going to take half of 4, which is 2, and square it, add 4 to both sides, and we have x plus 2 quantity squared equals 18. Then we're going to take the square root of both sides, and we get x plus 2 equals plus or minus square root of 18 is 3 square roots of 2, because this is 9 times 2, and square root of 9 is 3. Then we are going to subtract 2 from both sides, and we get x equals -2 plus or minus 3 times the square root of 2. That's actually two different answers. X is -2 plus 3 root 2, or x is -2 minus 3 square roots of 2. This is the exact answer. If you want an approximation, x is approximately 2.243 or -6.243. So if we were to plug it into our calculator and round to the nearest thousandths, those are the two answers we would get, which we don't normally. We normally just want to keep the exact. Okay, one more example. Example 5, 5x squared minus 40x equals -85. So again, we want to have 1 for coefficient of x squared. Divide everything by 5, you get x squared minus 8x, leave a space, equals -17. So we take half of -8, which is -4, and square it. We're going to add 16 to both sides. So we have x minus 4 quantity squared equals -1. Here's the problem. There is no number that when we square, we're going to get a -1. Or maybe you don't know that and you can just do square root of, and here we have the square root of -1. It's not possible. So x minus 4 equals plus or minus square root of -1. There is no real solution. Make sure you include that word real when you do problems like that. And that's the end of the lesson.